Before the story begins, if you enjoy intense sci-fi where humanity refuses to be prey, hit like, subscribe for more HFY stories every week, and comment below what you think really makes humans dangerous, strength, strategy, or something else entirely. They called it a simple contract, and the numbers attached to it suggested nothing otherwise. One human male, last recorded alone on a hostile frontier world, injured after a crash and broadcasting only fragments of emergency telemetry. The species profile labeled him poorly armored, biologically fragile, and statistically insignificant when isolated. That alone was enough to make the bounty feel insulting. Korth Vale still accepted without hesitation. He was the leader of the mercenary unit Black Spiral, a veteran hunter whose scars were catalogued across 3 sectors and 2 wars. Korth had brought down creatures deemed untouchable by the Galactic Council, tunneling leviathans, plasma-spitting hive lords, things that required entire regiments to corner. Compared to that, a lone human barely qualified as training exercise. Confirm target parameters, Korth said as the transport pierced the planet's cloud ceiling. His voice was calm, unhurried, the sound of someone who had never doubted the outcome of a hunt. The onboard intelligence chimed. Target, human male. Combat experienced. Known for irregular tactics. Advisory note: human behavioral patterns do not conform to established predator-prey models. A ripple of amusement passed through the squad. 6 of them in total, all male, all killers by trade. Chris the tracker adjusted the bone filigree masking his eyes, already tasting atmospheric data. Rawl the heavy gunner checked the charge on his spinal cannon. Even Severin, the psionic seer whose species rarely laughed, allowed himself a thin curl of contempt. Prey with excuses, Severin murmured. They always add warnings when the fear outweighs the threat. Korth didn't respond, but he noted the planet beneath them. Red canopies of carnivorous flora stretched to the horizon, pierced by jagged stone ridges and deep mist-filled ravines. This was a death world, classed hostile long before anyone bothered studying what lived there. Apex signatures littered the scans like static. Touchdown in 30 seconds, the pilot announced. On the surface, miles away from the landing site, the human felt the impact through the ground. His name was Jonah Reed, though no one on this side of the galaxy knew that mattered. He lay half-hidden beneath the roots of a shattered megaflora trunk, breath slow, muscles tight with restrained pain. His left arm was splinted with scavenged alloy, his right hand wrapped around a rifle older than most of the species hunting him. The rifle wasn't impressive. Neither, by most measures, was he. Jonah listened. He had learned early in his career that humans survived not by overpowering hostile environments, but by reading them. The planet spoke in vibrations and silence, in the sudden absence of smaller life. The mercenaries had arrived loud, confident, unaware of the message that arrival sent through the ecosystem. They took the bait, Jonah muttered under his breath. He hadn't broadcast by accident. He needed them here in a specific stretch of terrain the locals avoided at all costs. His crash had earned him more than shattered equipment and cracked ribs. It had earned him attention he couldn't have bought with credits. Something enormous shifted in the distance. Jonah didn't look toward it. He didn't need to. Hours later, Black Spiral moved in formation across the jungle floor, weapons raised, senses extended. Nothing attacked them, which was the first thing that unsettled Korth. Death worlds didn't wait politely. They punished arrogance swiftly and messily. Tracks incoming, Chris reported. Human sustained injury. Moving slow. Good, Korth replied. He bleeds like anything else. A subtle tremor ran through the ground. Not violent, not sudden, deliberate. Severin stiffened, his mental field brushing against something vast and old. There is another presence, Severin said carefully. Not human. Rawl snorted. This planet is full of monsters. Focus. The drone they released ahead of them vanished a second later, crushed by something the sensors failed to identify. No sound followed. No roar of triumph. Just absence. Korth raised a clenched fist, halting the squad. Cold calculation replaced amusement. Formation tight. Eyes open. The human isn't the only variable. From his vantage point, Jonah finally allowed himself a thin smile. They were cautious now, but caution wouldn't save them. He reached down, pressed his palm briefly against the soil, a gesture that meant nothing to the mercenaries watching the underbrush. But the ground answered. The jungle went quiet, the kind of quiet that made experienced hunters uneasy. Far behind the squad, something massive began to move, unhurried and patient. The mercenaries thought they were closing in on prey, unaware they had entered the center of a hunt already in progress. Jonah rose, pain flaring and fading as he forced it aside, and adjusted his path just enough to lead them exactly where he wanted. The galaxy believed humans were dangerous because they adapted. The truth was far worse. Humans knew when not to hunt alone. The first mistake Black Spiral made was assuming the human was running. Korth advanced at the center of the formation, every sense sharpened, weapon held low but ready. The jungle pressed in around them, foliage thick enough to disrupt line of sight while still leaving enough visibility for sudden death to arrive from any direction. The tracked signs were obvious almost to the point of insult. Broken ferns, shallow blood droplets, a limping gait that suggested weakness rather than intent. Too obvious. His trail is inconsistent, Chris said quietly. He wants us to see it. Let him, Rawl replied. Fear makes prey sloppy. Korth said nothing, but he marked the change in rhythm. The ground's natural life had gone silent ahead of them. In his experience, that didn't signal escape. It signaled anticipation. Jonah Reed slowed deliberately, feeling the ache in his ribs sharpen as he leaned against a basalt outcrop. He could feel them behind him now, not with ears or eyes but with instinct. Their movement shook the ground differently than native fauna, controlled, disciplined, metallic. Professionals. He adjusted his pace again, dragging his injured leg just enough to reinforce the image they expected. Humans were good at many things, but deception came easiest when people underestimated the effort it took. Something enormous displaced air to his left, just far enough away that even alien senses would dismiss it as weather or shifting terrain. Jonah kept his eyes forward. Recognition didn't require looking. Not yet, he whispered. The mercenaries collected data as they advanced. Thermal readings flickered strangely, backgrounds warping, heat signatures briefly smearing as if something vast passed between the scanners and the jungle floor. One of the squad's smaller drones dipped below the canopy to get a clearer angle. It never returned. No explosion, Rawl said, peering at the feed's dead channel. No energy discharge. That implies physical force, Severin added, voice tighter than before. His mental senses brushed again against the void where clarity should have been, like running a hand through water and feeling resistance where none should exist. Large. Exceptionally so. Korth considered halting the pursuit. Instead, he changed their orientation, spreading the formation while narrowing the forward cone. The human was close. He could feel it in the way the terrain shifted, from random cruelty to deliberate design. They moved into a ravine. The walls rose abruptly, scarred with claw marks large enough to swallow a body. The floor was uneven, cracked stone interlaced with thick moss that dampened sound. Chris paused, eyes narrowing. This area is predator-marked, he said. Apex territory. Then we kill faster, Korth answered. The human is our priority. That was the second mistake. Jonah watched from above as they entered the ravine. The position made his jaw ache where old shrapnel sat near nerve endings, a reminder of past learning curves. He triggered the anchor line on his wrist and shifted his weight, allowing gravity to take some of it. Stone gave way. The collapse wasn't violent enough to be lethal, but it scattered the formation exactly as planned. Dust filled the ravine, visibility reduced to instinct and sound. Korth rolled clear, weapon snapping up, while Rawl absorbed the brunt of the impact behind layered armor. Chris wasn't as fortunate. The ground beneath him dropped a second time, revealing a cavern mouth that hadn't been there a heartbeat earlier. He fell without sound, vanishing into darkness before anyone could react. Chris down, Korth barked. Retrieve. The command died as the ravine floor shook. Not from collapse. From weight. A massive shape slid through the dust on silent limbs, its outline only briefly visible as it crossed an open patch of light. It moved with terrifying economy, each step placed with intention rather than force. Chris didn't scream. His signal cut off mid-breath. Severin recoiled, clutching his head. It's not hunting blindly, he gasped. It's waiting. Observing. Jonah fired then, not at flesh but at stone. The rifle's discharge cracked a support ridge high above the mercenaries, sending debris down in a controlled arc. He wanted their attention fractured, their eyes pulled where he chose. They fired back, energy bolts flaring uselessly into smoke and shadow. Jonah relocated between heartbeats, rolling, crawling, shifting levels the way humans adapted to vertical chaos since their earliest wars. He wasn't trying to kill them yet. He was teaching them. Korth caught a glimpse of him then, a silhouette against mist and falling ash. Smaller than expected. Slower. Bleeding. And yet, Korth thought grimly, he hasn't panicked once. The massive presence moved again, closer this time. Rawl turned just in time to raise his weapon before an unseen force smashed it aside like a toy. Something struck him, hard enough to dent armor engineered to withstand orbital debris. He survived only because Korth dragged him clear. "We are being herded," Severin said, terror seeping through his disciplined control. "The human is guiding it." Korth finally understood the pattern. The human wasn't commanding the predator. He was cooperating with it. "Regroup," Korth ordered. "Withdraw from the ravine." They pulled back under pressure, every step contested by falling stone, constricting terrain, and the looming certainty of something that refused to rush them. The predator didn't pursue openly, it followed the rhythm the human set, advancing when retreat slowed, receding when panic threatened to break formation. By the time they reached open ground, Black Spiral was reduced, shaken, and bleeding. The jungle noise slowly returned, as if the world itself had released a held breath. Jonah watched from the treeline, chest heaving, pain burning bright but manageable. He felt the vast presence pause behind him, satisfied with the lesson delivered. "They won't underestimate us now," Jonah said softly. The hunt had only just begun, but the roles were no longer in question. Night fell without darkness. Bioluminescent spores drifted through the jungle canopy, casting slow-moving light that turned every shadow into a suggestion rather than a certainty. Jonah Reed moved through it with measured restraint, measuring each breath, letting pain flare and fade without acknowledgement. Behind him, the ground responded in its own way, subtle vibrations telegraphing the presence of something vast that no longer needed stealth to inspire fear. The apex predator followed at a distance that said trust, not obedience. Jonah had learned its language the hard way. Not sound or gesture but intent. When he slowed, it slowed. When he altered course, the great shape adjusted, never overlapping his path, never obstructing him. Twice now it could have ended the mercenaries outright. It hadn't. That restraint was not instinct. It was choice. Black Spiral regrouped near the remains of an ancient stone plateau, weapons arrayed outward, wounded tended with brutal efficiency. Rawl's armor was split along one side, the composite fractured inward as if struck by a force that ignored physics rather than fought it. He lived, but the fight had left him silent, eyes tracking the jungle as if it might suddenly lean in close. Korth stood apart from his men, gaze fixed on the treeline. "This wasn't chance," he said. "The human chose that ravine. He chose when to strike and when to let us go." Severin nodded grimly. "And the predator deferred. That should be impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Korth replied, though the words no longer carried certainty. "Only misunderstood." Jonah listened from afar, catching fragments carried on air currents tuned to carry danger. He wasn't hiding now. That phase had passed. What came next required clarity. He shifted position deliberately, letting his movement register. A branch snapped under his boot. The predator halted behind him, massive head lifting, attention focused outward rather than on him. "That's close enough," Jonah called, voice rough but steady. "I'm done leading." Weapons snapped toward him instantly. Target locks whined. Energy fields shimmered. For a long moment nothing moved. Then the jungle answered. The ground rose as the creature emerged fully into view, towering over the mercenaries with a presence that bent light and sound around it. Its hide bore countless scars, each one healed cleanly, a history written by survival rather than conquest. Eyes like polished stone fixed not on Jonah, but on the armed figures pointing weapons at something under its protection. Korth felt the weight of it press against his perception, not telepathic, not aggressive, simply undeniable. "You did not dominate it," he said, more to himself than to Jonah. "You didn't leash it." Jonah lowered his rifle slightly. "No. I helped it when it didn't have to let me." Memory flickered through his mind, blood-soaked ground, shattered bone the size of his torso, a creature in pain too proud to roar. He had not approached with weapons drawn. He had approached knowing it could end him with a twitch and did so anyway. Predators respected that. The creature shifted one limb, reminder enough of how fast death could arrive. Severin staggered back, mental defenses collapsing under the pressure of a will that did not need to intrude to overwhelm. "This is wrong," Severin whispered. "It recognizes him." "It recognizes behavior," Jonah corrected. "Fear. Honesty. Resolve. Same things all hunters judge." "You're bleeding," Korth said, eyes tracking the tremor Jonah fought to suppress. "You won't last." Jonah smiled faintly. "Didn't need to. Just needed time." The predator surged forward then, not charging, not striking, simply advancing. The effect was immediate. Rawl fired in panic, his shot scattering harmlessly across the creature's hide before vanishing into the jungle beyond. The return blow was measured and devastating, a single impact that sent the heavy gunner flying, armor folding like thin alloy. Only Korth remained standing. The predator halted again, gaze flicking briefly to Jonah, awaiting signal. Jonah held still. Every instinct screamed to finish it, to survive. "You didn't?" Mercy mattered now. "That's enough," he said quietly. The creature withdrew one step, then another, looming still but allowing space to exist again. Korth breathed for the first time in what felt like cycles. "You could have ended us," Korth said. "Why leave any alive?" Jonah met his gaze. "Because stories matter. And you're going to tell this one honestly." Silence stretched between them, heavy but unbroken. Finally, Korth inclined his head, the gesture painful but sincere. "We misjudged the prey," he said. "And the hunt." Jonah turned away first, trusting the predator at his back. As they vanished into the jungle's glowing depths, the mercenary leader understood what truly terrified the galaxy. Humans didn't tame monsters. They walked beside them, and knew when to stop them. Dawn crept across the jungle in layers rather than light, the bioluminescence fading as harsh, honest color returned to leaves and stone. Jonah Reed sat on a fallen ridge, binding his ribs with practiced efficiency, while the massive predator rested several body lengths away, still as a carved monument. It watched the horizon, not him, as if standing guard over a boundary only it understood. The silence didn't last. A low-frequency thrum rolled through the air, artificial and deliberate. Jonah cursed softly as the sound resolved into the unmistakable signature of a long-range distress beacon. Black Spiral hadn't fled quietly after all. Korth Vale stood in a clearing 2 kilometers away, antennae of scorched equipment jammed into the earth, broadcasting toward the upper atmosphere with diminishing power. Of the squad that had landed, only 3 still breathed. Rahl lay unconscious, alive more by stubborn physiology than armor, while Severin knelt nearby, hands pressed to his temples as if trying to hold his thoughts together. "They will come," Severin said, voice strained. "Enforcers. Guild weapon teams. They won't believe us." "They'll believe the wreckage," Korth replied. "And the signal trail. Whether they listen is not my concern." A shadow shifted at the edge of the clearing. Korth turned slowly, weapons lowered but not dropped. He had learned that sudden movements meant nothing to something that could end him before his muscles finished twitching. Jonah emerged into view, rifle slung but visible, expression tight from pain and fatigue rather than fear. The predator followed, its presence bending the clearing's geometry until it felt too small to hold it. "This doesn't end with you walking away," Korth said. "They marked you. They'll try again." Jonah nodded once. "I know. Then why spare us?" Severin demanded, desperation cracking through his discipline. "Why not erase the witnesses?" Jonah looked at him for a long moment, then back at the beacon clawing its signal into space. "Because the lie breaks faster when someone survives to contradict it." Korth exhaled slowly. "You want the galaxy to know." "I want them to stop hunting ghosts," Jonah replied. "And start paying attention to patterns." The predator lowered its massive head, nostrils flaring as unfamiliar vibrations rippled through the air. Distant but approaching. Jonah felt it tense, readiness coiling through muscle that could tear through armored vehicles without slowing. "Easy," Jonah said softly, not as command but as reassurance. The creature stilled. Korth watched that exchange with grim clarity. "That thing has killed beyond counting." "So have we," Jonah said. "Difference is it doesn't lie to itself about why." Severin flinched as the words landed. His mental senses brushed the predator again, not recoiling this time but observing. For the first time he understood the shape of its awareness. Not savage. Not cruel. Simply complete. "The Council classifies apex predators as unavoidable disasters," Severin said hoarsely. "Forces of nature." Jonah finally looked tired. "Then maybe they should stop trying to negotiate with nature using bullets." The jungle trembled as distant craft entered atmosphere, their arrival broadcast harshly through sound and vibration alike. The predator rose to its full height, eyes fixed on the sky. It didn't retreat. It didn't advance. It waited. "They won't attack," Korth said suddenly. "Not immediately. This place, after what we saw, they'll hesitate." Jonah nodded. "That's all I needed." The first dropships broke through the canopy edge moments later, engines roaring, weapons primed but unused. Sensor arrays swept the clearing, hesitated, recalculated. Data flooded in faster than doctrine could process it. A human stood unrestrained beside a creature the guild had classified as extinction level. And neither attacked. Command voices crackled over open channels, confused, cautious, afraid to escalate what they didn't understand. Korth straightened, ignoring the pain flaring through his injured side, and keyed his own transmitter. "This is Korth Vale of Black Spiral," he said, voice carrying through amplified space. "Contract failed. Target not captured. Advisory update follows." There was a pause. Then authorization chimed. Korth didn't embellish. He didn't dramatize. He told them exactly what happened. About the hunt. The ravine. The coordination. The restraint. About a human who didn't control an apex predator, but was recognized by one. When he finished, the channel remained silent longer than regulations allowed. Jonah met Korth's eyes. "Say it right." Korth inclined his head. "Humans are not apex predators," he said into the channel. "They are apex allies. And they change the balance wherever they walk." The predator let out a low, resonant sound, not a roar but a declaration. The surrounding jungle answered in kind, life resuming its ancient rhythm, indifferent to politics and contracts. As the dropships withdrew, unwilling to test the truth still settling into fear, Jonah turned away, trusting the massive presence at his side to follow without question. This battle was over. The consequence of it was only beginning. Jonah Reed moved through the wrecked jungle with the predator at his flank, each step measured, deliberate, and careful. The world had changed overnight. Where before mercenaries had believed themselves hunters, now all movement whispered of fear, respect, and the cold realization that humans were not to be underestimated. Every leaf, every broken branch beneath his boots, seemed to echo with a lesson the galaxy would be forced to learn. The predator's presence was constant but restrained, a silent guardian that moved as though the air itself bent to accommodate its bulk. Jonah glanced at it occasionally, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Neither had to speak. Trust had been earned in moments that most species never survived long enough to recognize. They approached a ridge overlooking the clearing where Black Spiral had been broken, where Korth and the surviving mercenaries lingered, nursing wounds and shattered pride. Korth's posture was rigid, tension coiling through his shoulders like wires pulled tight. For the first time he looked at Jonah not as prey but as an equal, a reflection of a reality he had refused to consider until now. "You've changed how the galaxy will see us," Korth said quietly, almost to himself. "I've hunted apex creatures before. I've killed them. But I've never seen one defer to anything, or anyone, except necessity." Jonah's lips twitched into a faint, grim smile. "They defer to respect," he said. "Not strength. Not bullets. Respect and understanding." Severin stirred, still pale but steadying himself against the ridge's stone. "And the council? The guilds? They'll see this and call it anomaly, aberration, until it happens again." "That's exactly the point," Jonah said. "It has to happen again but on our terms. Humans survive by choosing allies wisely. We're not the strongest individually, but we are adaptable." He tapped the predator's flank lightly. "And some allies can change the rules of the hunt." The predator's eyes glimmered, intelligent and patient, and for a moment the universe seemed to pause, as though even time understood the weight of that bond. Korth shifted uneasily, the first stirrings of humility and awe battling his instincts as a seasoned hunter. He had once believed apex creatures were the ultimate test of strategy and force, yet here stood a human who did not dominate, did not coerce, and had still survived intact where most hunters had already perished. Suddenly the air trembled with the distant hum of engines, dropships returning, likely scouting reinforcements. Jonah's eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon, weighing options. The predator's tail flicked with tension, muscles coiled like living steel. Jonah didn't flinch. They didn't need to fight. Not yet. Survival had always been as much about timing as it had been about strength. Korth raised his hand, halting the mercenaries who were poised to react. He understood instinctively, any attack would play into the humans' hands, and they had already witnessed the lesson of caution. He lowered his weapons, letting clarity replace fear, and for the first time he saw the human lead not as a target but as an example. Jonah's voice cut through the hum of engines, calm but firm. "Let them see. Let the galaxy watch. Humans do not hunt alone, and some species understand the rules before anyone else learns them." He paused, letting the words sink into the minds of the survivors and the distant watchers alike. "We survive by partnerships, by reading the environment, and by earning respect where others see only domination." The predator stepped forward, enormous yet controlled, positioning itself so the approaching ships could see it without risking the human. Its presence radiated dominance and intelligence, a living testament to the choice Jonah had made, and that choice had rewritten the rules of engagement. Even the mercenaries understood it, though unspoken, that the human and his companion could survive forces that would have obliterated any ordinary hunter. From the ridge, Jonah surveyed the horizon one last time. The dropships hovered, scanning, confused by the anomaly before them. Korth and his remaining squad absorbed the message in silence, their pride fractured but their understanding deepened. Humans were not apex predators by force of biology alone. They were apex manipulators, tacticians, and partners of creatures who themselves defined the limits of power. Jonah lowered his rifle fully, chest rising and falling steadily. He could feel every nerve, every muscle, the remnants of injury fading under adrenaline and focus. The predator relaxed beside him, a living shadow that had chosen alliance over appetite, intelligence over instinct. They moved as one, a single entity understood by neither prey nor pursuer alone. Then, without warning, the jungle itself seemed to respond. Birds erupted in sudden flight, small mammals scurried to hidden burrows, and distant branches cracked under pressure unseen. The predator turned its head slightly, listening, calculating, ready. Jonah understood. It was a reminder that even in victory, caution remained necessary. The world was still dangerous. The galaxy still underestimated humans. And they had survived, not by chance, but by mastery of their instincts, intelligence, and alliances. Korth exhaled, finally lowering his weapons entirely. He met Jonah's gaze fully for the first time. "You've shown me something no training, no experience could ever teach," he admitted. "And it terrifies me more than any beast I've faced." Jonah inclined his head, silent acknowledgement passing between them. Survival was more than muscle and weapons. It was understanding, adaptation, and the courage to face beings far stronger than oneself, and still extend trust to those who had earned it. The predator, massive and terrifying, had chosen the human but not as a subordinate. As an equal. The sound of distant engines faded. The surviving mercenaries were left with the memory, the scars, and the lesson. They would carry it back across the stars, their reports tinged with disbelief, awe, and a new understanding of what it meant to hunt, or to be hunted. Jonah and the predator moved forward together, disappearing into the dense undergrowth, leaving behind a clearing that bore witness to the impossible. Somewhere in the galaxy the tale would spread. Humans were no longer the weak link, the expendable prey, the statistic. They were unpredictable, adaptable, and in certain cases, untouchable when paired with the right allies. The jungle settled once more, the air vibrating with life and quiet intelligence. Jonah Reed, bleeding but unbroken, smiled faintly. The predator stayed at his side, a silent partner that had changed the rules of survival. And somewhere beyond the trees, the galaxy began to understand that humans were not alone, and never would be. They had survived. They had won. And the legend had only just begun.